All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a number I know you've heard before, but we're going to look at it in a completely new way.
You see, what if the most famous statistic about work is also the one we misunderstand the most? The whole story of the gender pay gap, it's just way more complicated than one single number. And to really get our heads around it, we're not going to start with economics. Nope, we're going to start with psychology.
We're going to lean on this amazing idea from the late, great Hans Rosling. He called it the gap instinct. And what is that? Well, it's our natural human urge to just split things into two neat opposing groups, good versus bad, us versus them. The problem is, that instinct can really mess with how we see the world, ignoring all the messy, complicated reality in the middle. And that idea, that's going to be our guide for this whole explainer.
Okay, so a trick of the mind. Let's dig into how this little mental shortcut actually works. See, when we use this gap instinct to look at something like the pay gap, it basically leads us to make two huge mistakes.
First off, it tricks us into seeing this big, clean divide between two groups, when in reality, there's a ton of overlap. And second, and this is a big one, it completely hides the massive differences within each of those groups. And that's often where the real story of inequality is.
All right, so let's take that idea and apply it to the number everyone knows, the 82-cent statistic. This is the one that always starts the debate, right?
82%. I mean, you've heard it a million times, right? The typical full-time female worker earns 82% of what the typical man earns. It's the headline number.
And if you want to get specific, let's look at the 2020 numbers. The median weekly earning for a woman was $891. For a man, it was $1,082. You do the math, and boom, that's where you get that 82%.
But what does that number actually hide? Because this right here is where that gap instinct really grabs hold of us. We see men on one side, women on the other, two completely separate blocks. And that simple, tidy picture, it pulls us way off track from what's really going on.
So how do we fight that instinct? Well, we have to stop looking at just the averages. We have to look at the whole picture, the entire range of what all men and all women are earning.
And this chart reveals so much. Okay, look at this. On the left, you've got the wage distributions from 1979. See how those two humps, one for men and one for women, are pretty far apart? Now look at the right. That's 2019. Wow! It's what the economist Claudia Goldin calls the grand gender convergence. The two groups have moved so much closer together.
But here's the other key takeaway, and it really shows that second mistake our brains make. The distributions aren't just closer, they're also way more spread out. What does that mean? It means the gap inside the group of women, between the highest paid and lowest paid, has gotten huge. And you see the exact same thing happening for men.
So what happens when you have this massive overlap? Well, you get a statistic that's kind of mind-blowing. 40%.
Get this, 40% of women now earn more than the typical, or median, man. Let that sink in. 2 out of every 5 women. That is a massive jump from 1979, when it was only 13%. It just proves the story is not as simple as men earn more than women, not by a long shot.
Okay, so if the data is pretty clear that things have been converging, why is this still one of the most explosive, most heated debates out there? What's the real disagreement about?
Well, on one side of the argument, you have this perspective from people like Tony Van Pelt of the National Organization for Women. The view is that the remaining gap, that 18 cents, is just blatant proof of a patriarchal system that holds women back and devalues their work, period.
Then, on the other side, you have thinkers like Christina Hoff Sommers from the American Enterprise Institute. Their take is that the 82-cent figure is, and I'm quoting here, a massively discredited factoid. Basically, a misleading myth that's used for political points and totally ignores the real-life choices people are making.
So you see, here are the two main explanations. The real fight here isn't about the numbers themselves. It's about why the numbers are what they are. Is it a systemic problem, or is it a consequence of choices? That's the core of the disagreement.
And this is where you hear a lot about adjusting the numbers. People will say, okay, let's account for things like hours worked, the industry someone is in, their level of experience, to try and compare apples to apples.
And when you do all that, when you control for all those factors, the gap shrinks a lot. It goes down to about 5%, the so-called adjusted pay gap.
But deeper questions remain, because that 5% number, it's not the end of the story, not even close. You might think, okay, 5%, that settles it. But really, it just blows the door open to a whole new set of much tougher questions.
Case closed? No way.
Because just saying, oh, women get paid less because they choose different jobs, well, that doesn't actually answer the question. It just pushes it one step back.
It leaves us asking, why? Why do those choices and patterns exist in the first place? Why do we see women clustering in certain, often lower-paying industries? Why are there fewer women in the top senior positions? Is it because of the gender roles we're taught from childhood? Is it institutional sexism, things built into the system? Or maybe, just maybe, is it that the work women have traditionally done is just valued less?
And that is the real question, isn't it? Is the gap we see a product of pure, unconstrained choice, or is it a product of the choices we're given? That question goes so much deeper than just 82 cents. It forces us to look at the whole system. And honestly, that is a much, much smarter question to be asking.